Welcome back to 5 Good Questions. I'm your host, Jake Taylor. Our guest today is Adam Levin. Adam is a consumer advocate with more than 30 years' experience in personal finance, privacy, real estate, and government service. A former director of the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs, Levin is chairman and founder of Identity Theft 911 and chairman and co-founder of Credit.com. He writes a weekly column for Huffington Post and ABCnews.com, and today we'll be discussing his new book, Swiped: How to Protect Yourself in a World Full of Scammers, Phishers, and Identity Thieves. Adam is a frequent guest on television and radio discussing all things data security. Let's ask him 5 good questions. Welcome back to the show, everybody. My guest today is Adam Levin, author of Swiped. Now, Adam, this book is really all about identity theft, and I had to confess now that I didn't know very much about this. I thought I did, but after reading your book, it was like I realized how little I actually knew.
No, it's surprising how much people don't really know, or how many misconceptions there are out there, how much misinformation there is about this. And for years, identity theft was horribly underreported because no one could figure out exactly how to designate it. Was it some kind of a fraud situation? Was it simply an account takeover problem? They just didn't know. Police departments didn't know how to properly report it. Governments didn't know how to properly report it. So I think the world is more in line now with what it is.
Yeah, let's dig in a little deeper on it. Question number 1. Identity theft seems like something that only happens to other people. That's what everyone thinks. But I watched the first season of Mr. Roboto, so I think I know I'm like a computer hacker now.
Yeah.
But seriously, how big are the risks that we're talking about here? Both like on a probability basis and also the impact that can have on somebody as far as lost time and money.
Well, the truth of the matter is that identity theft is a pandemic, first of all. I mean, we've gone beyond epidemic, it's pandemic. And that it is again, taken too lightly by people. There is the what they call the foxhole syndrome, which is, they shot the other guy.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen to me. And based on that concept, businesses have been breached, government has been compromised on so many different levels. Consumers face compromise literally on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And as a result, we really have to change the way we look at things. We need a paradigm shift in the way we view things, because breaches, unfortunately, become the third certainty in life behind death and taxes. And as a result, it is inevitable that each of us will become a victim of some form of identity theft during our lifetimes, probably multiple forms of identity theft. We could even become a victim of identity theft when we've passed away. And to put this in context, that in the past few years, over 1 billion, now think of Dr. Evil with the pinky to the lips, billion files containing personal identifiable information have been improperly exposed to people who had no right to be anywhere near them and had every interest in using somebody else's information for their gain.
I mean, is it likely that your stuff is probably out there and it's just a matter of time until someone gets to it? Is that
I really believe that the only reason why everyone hasn't become a victim of identity theft already is that the identity thieves haven't gotten around to you yet. Because there's real value for them in our data. And so much of our data is everywhere. Now, whether it's because it's been aggregated by organizations with whom we do business, aggregated by governments who are communicating with us at a variety of different levels, or overshared online through social networking. Bottom line, it's really out there. And especially for those of us in the US, our social security numbers, in Canada, the social insurance numbers, the medical numbers, insurance numbers in Europe. But the bottom line, this information is out there. We are vulnerable, and especially because we live so much of our lives online.
Yeah.
And we get so many different communications from people we know, we think we know, we have absolutely no idea who they are, but they sound official, and that we tend to respond before thinking. Because again, each of us has a day job. Therefore, we're busy and we're distracted. And identity thieves look for that distraction as a vulnerability because for them, we are their day job.
Right. So question number 2, everyone I think knows not to try to advertise their social security number online as best they can. But really, what are a few of the easiest things that someone can do to help protect themselves a little bit? And it almost seems to me like this is the kind of the case of running a little bit faster than the guy next to you, so the bear doesn't catch you. Like you don't have to outrun the bear; you just have to outrun the guy next to you.
That's again the other guy. But
right.
In order to make sure it's the other guy and not you, you really have to be more covetous of your information. And in the book, Swipe, we talk about the 3 M's. And now we're talking about the first M. And there are a variety of things that you can do. The first is never carry your social security card or whatever identification card it is in your purse or wallet, ever, or that of your kids. Now, when you get to be my age, young fellow that I am, and you get a Medicare card, things become a little bit more complicated because up until recently, your social security number was your Medicare number with a letter. So I tell people to take the card, make a copy, redact most of the numbers, and then put on the back the phone number of a contact person for you who would have that information in the event you're in an accident and you're incapacitated, and they, instead of being able to get that number, at least they have a phone number for someone they can call who can give them that number. Minimize the number of credit and debit cards you carry with you at any one time. Always have some in reserve. Also, it helps you minimize the damage. Third, be extremely covetous of your personal identifying information. If someone calls you, approaches you physically, or sends you something online, don't just give it up.
Yeah, be skeptical.
That's right. Be skeptical. Always be in control of the interaction. If you're not, if someone contacts you and starts asking you to authenticate yourself, hang up, because if they're calling you as if they are some official organization, they should already be able to authenticate you. So only if you're in control of the conversation or in control of the email. The other thing is, do not click on links on email for 2 reasons. One, because they could be laden with malware, which will turn your computer into a transmitter, which will then provide login information every time you log in to the hackers who are essentially looking over your shoulder, and they're particularly interested in financial services information or even information where you might be communicating with some government entity through a secure site. And that's, look for the HTTPS, all that kind of stuff. The second thing is that they also could be looking to have created a clone site that looks incredibly authentic. The purpose of that clone site is to get you to enter information that you ordinarily wouldn't do, but you're only doing it because you think it's coming from a real person.
Yeah.
Some other things, passwords. Now, we are moving toward two-factor authentication, and biometrics is going to be part of that two-factor authentication. But for now, when you're using passwords, don't use password. Don't do like they did in Ashley Madison, where a lot of people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or Ashley. Don't do the obvious. They should be long and strong. They should be alphanumeric. There should be numbers. There should be symbols. There should be letters, upper and lower case, punctuation, those kinds of things. Password managers, not a bad idea, but remember, some password management sites have been breached. So again, you have to be careful. You could take your passwords, download them into an encrypted thumb drive, but you need to make sure of 2 things. 1, you remember where you put the thumb drive, and 2, you remember the passcode to the thumb drive. You can also create a system, which is where you take a phrase, a lyric from your favorite song, whatever. That's the core of your password. And then what you do is you put a couple letters in front of it, so you'll remind yourself of the website that you use it on, and then maybe a number or 2 behind it, and then mix it up. And never, ever, ever share your passwords among your universe of sites, your social networking, email, financial services, and retailing sites, because if you get breached on one, you get breached on all. So mix it up and be mindful of that, and always use the longest and the strongest for your email and your social network and your financial services. I'm sorry.
That's a good segue to question number 3 about, what if you feel a little bit daunted by having so many of different passwords? What can we other than maybe passphrases, which I've read that might be a pretty good option as far as being hard to crack, just because it's so like a longer string. I guess the brute force methods don't work as well on that.
Right.
But I mean, what else can we possibly do? I mean, I know personally I have a million different logins, and it's the idea of coming up with a million unique ones kind of scares me a little bit.
Well, no, and they don't have to be necessarily all unique, but what they need to be is rememberable by you and not decipherable by somebody else.
Okay.
And
so
this
very idiosyncratic.
Yeah, and this brings us to the question of security questions, right? Because, I mean, that plays a major role in most of the websites that we visit. And you need to remember that your answer to a security question must be consistent. It doesn't have to be truthful. So when they ask you for your mother's maiden name, if you give them a name other than your mother's real maiden name, it's not like they're going to conduct an investigative search to determine whether or not this is your mother's maiden name, or what your high school is, or the mascot, or you can pick any answer you want. First of all, you can pick any question you want within the bounds of what they offer you, and you can invent the answer, which is the way you should be operating online anyway. No one told you have to give everyone your exact birthday. I mean, if you feel compelled that on a specific day of the year that you have to have thousands of people, most of whom you don't know, extending birthday wishes to you, that's one thing. Don't give them the year. You lie about the year. Use a nickname. Tighten all of the controls you have on social networking.
That's a great segue for question number 4. How has social media really changed the game in the identity theft world?
Well, one of the great questions to ask any divorce lawyer is how's social networking changed the game in your profession? 81% of them said that it's the greatest thing that happened to divorce lawyers since the beginning of the legal system. Because people will say one thing, but then go to their site, and you're going to find a lot of things that you didn't expect to find. So that's why, people have to be careful. You have to have a memory when it comes to these kinds of things. But the problem with social networking is that there is a unquenchable thirst for people to share every possible aspect of their lives.
Yeah.
Again, people they know, people they don't know, people they think they want to know, and people they have no idea are there for the real reason that they want to take advantage of them and use their information to exploit them. So, do you have to give people your full birth date? No, you don't. Do you have to tell people your physical address? No, you don't. Do you really need to take pictures of your new car, your new piece of artwork, your first license, your really cool new credit or debit card? Do you really need to do that? Absolutely not. When you go online and are confronted with all of these quizzes, keep in mind that think of this as components of a nuclear weapon. In and of themselves, each component may be harmless, but when combined, it could become lethal. And that's the same thing with quizzes. Is your favorite color, your dog, the street you grew up on, your mother's maiden name?
They're just asking you all your questions for your password hack.
There you go. These are the answers to your security questions. Also, when you travel, do you really need to share real time every one of your life experiences with basically the rest of humanity? The answer is no, you don't.
Yeah.
Because remember, in addition to all of the other pitfalls you face, if you're telling someone where you are also effectively telling them where you're not. So if they want to stalk you, they can figure out how to find you.
Or go to your house and break in. Yeah.
That's right. If they want to burglarize you, they know where to go. And the other thing is when people take pictures, they have to be really careful. Now, some websites scramble the geotag on the picture. And that's that code that effectively tells somebody where it was taken and when it was taken. And the issue is that unless it's scrambled, perfect example, here we are at Washington Park with our little girl, Susie. It's Susie's 2nd birthday. Now, what does somebody know? You're at a park with your child. The birthday gives them a pretty good clue as to what the birth date is of the child. so they can start the process of gathering the breadcrumbs to steal that child's identity, not to mention the fact they could show up at Washington Park and talk to little Susie and sound convincing enough as if you sent them that little Susie might possibly go with them. And that's something you don't want as well. So that's one of the other dangers you have. Social networking, for whatever reason, people think they are invincible online. You are not invincible online, that you have to be more careful when you operate online and look at your information and say, this is my asset. Why do I want, it's like taking several $1,000s in cash, putting it in your hand and walking up to someone and say, you want it? That's not what you want to do.
Yeah. So question number 5. There's this big movement now of the Internet of Things, where basically all of our appliances the whole world's going to be connected to sensors that feed data back to central places that we can then process big data and have all these insights into our lives.
Yes.
With that kind of progress, what kind of vulnerability is that also creating for us? And kind of related to that, I really found that concept of medical identity theft to be particularly scary and something I'd never really thought about before. So what's that all about as well, while kind of in that same vein?
Okay, well, first of all, when you talk about the Internet of Things, all you need to do, for those of you who saw either the movie or the TV show Minority Report, that's all you need to think about, is that we will end up in a world where when you walk by a billboard, it will be scanning your retina and putting up there an ad which is appealing to you based on all of the preferences that have been gathered and aggregated about you and stored and disseminated. And that's where you run into trouble, is that we don't even realize how many organizations are gathering data about us at every moment of our lives, whether we're online or through the Internet of Things in our home. It could be the television set, the toaster, the appliance, the security device, the HVAC unit, the baby monitor. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And the purpose of the Internet of Things is to feed data back to the manufacturers for the purpose of figuring out what's right and wrong with these products and how to make them more effective, more convenient. You know, the danger always is convenience trumps security. They even have a mattress cover now that can figure out when you go to sleep, how well you go to sleep, how well you sleep when you wake up, so it can turn on the coffee pot, turn on and off the lights, depending on the situation.
I'm sure measuring your other activities.
Oh, yes, your other activities as well. Just like that magical TV, where eventually it's going to be refined to the point where if you're sitting there with your significant other and you're canoodling, all of a sudden romantic movies come up. Whereas if you're thinking about something else, perhaps more fascinating movies may come up. If your kids walk in the room, suddenly Mickey Mouse comes up. But again, the problem is gathering data. You don't even know half the time it's gathering data. It may be recording things you say. I mean, one of the big television manufacturers has actually put a notice in the box that comes with the TV going, you may want to disable this. So one of the things you want to do whenever you use any product that is an Internet of Thing product, and you have to practically assume everything
going forward
is that read the manual, find out where you can change the user ID and password, because they all come with default user ID and passwords. And as a result, a clever person already knows the 4,200 sites that carry different information about the default user ID and password. So that's a critical thing. To live in the world of the Internet of Things, just as to live in the world of identity theft and breaches, you have to be much more careful with your information. You have to be in control, or at least more in control. The way to be more in control, change those user IDs and passwords, make them long and strong, check the router in your home, make that user ID and password long and strong. These are the kinds of proactive measures we're going to have to take. Now, as to medical identity theft is using the information of another for the specific purpose of accessing either their medical insurance or being able to go to a health professional as an imposter, as if you were that person, and getting treatments getting examinations, getting prescriptions in their name. Now, the danger with medical identity theft, that it's growing. Millions of people have become victims of it. It's not so easy to detect because you may never know until suddenly
You get a bill.
something strange. I helped a woman once who was a 72-year-old grandmother living in upstate New York that on one day, her Medicare was billed, her insurer was billed through Medicare for a sperm viability test and a pregnancy test based on fake laboratories that were operating. And I mean, the stories are legion about the different and creative ways that people do it. Story of a woman going into the office of a hospital administrator, throwing both legs up on his desk and saying, "Do I look like a double amputee to you?" So one of the ways to do it, at least in the US, is you look at your explanation of benefit statements that come that chronicle your treatments or your examinations and make absolutely sure that you were there. Because oftentimes you may find out that you really weren't there. And the problem with medical identity theft is not only depending upon the lifetime limits on certain insurance, which could be negatively impacted, or when you get pre-certified for a treatment or an operation of some sort, you may suddenly find out they're not going to do it because you already had it.
Yeah.
Or the information of the identity thief or their customer gets commingled with your information in that medical file. And suddenly blood types could change, allergies could appear and disappear, treatment can be prescribed, is prescribed based on what's in that file. And if that information is wrong, you could die. And so, we're no longer talking about just financial. I mean, if you look at the entire spectrum of identity theft, first it was credit and debit cards. Debit cards a little bit more problematic than credit because with credit, it's their money. With debit cards, it's your money and they can crawl into your bank account. Then you move on to true name identity theft where they can open accounts in your name and do things involving medical and others. Then you move to medical identity theft, more serious. Then you move to criminal identity theft, which is where they're committing crimes in your name so the trail of breadcrumbs leads back to you. Synthetic identity theft, where they take the identities of different people, squish them together, do all sorts of horrible things with them, and then the trail of breadcrumbs leads first back to the social security number and then to the name and the address through, let's say, background name checks. Child identity theft, where kids won't know, sometimes for 18 years, that they're a victim of identity theft. So this is kind of the way it goes. And then, of course, you have cybergeddon, which is where power grids are brought down and all sorts of horrible things happen. You've had many terrorist activities where the identities of the people who were engaged in the terrorist activities were those stolen from others that made it easier for them to travel and to move around because they were somebody who they really weren't.
Wow. So yeah, this is definitely a growing concern. So I think I'm going to go change my password right now, if you know. So one of the questions we always ask, a bonus question, and this is for a book recommendation, typically something that is underrated or you just feel like should get more love out there. What do you have for us today?
Well, the book that I'm a big fan of is called Future Crimes, and it's very well done. It's by a fellow who has been involved in law enforcement and technology for years, and it's a very compelling book. It's, as my book Swiped scares the heck out of people, Future Crimes will scare you even more. And some people go, the biggest problem with all you guys in the identity theft world is you just want to scare people. And my response is, do you understand the fact that people aren't scared enough? Businesses aren't scared enough. Government isn't scared enough. When you can have breaches at the level of 100 million Social Security numbers in this country being exposed because of healthcare providers, where you can have the Office of Personnel Management of the United States government, which is the HR department for the government, where you not only have contractors and government employees and former government employees and former contractors and spouses and friends and partners. I mean, I was on an airplane recently and I gave my book to some of the flight attendants, And they said, this is really timely because we just got notified that we were on the database of the Office of Personnel Management. I said, how can that be? You're private citizens, you don't work for the government. They said, yes, but we're in an airplane.
Yeah.
And so when you see something like that, we're not talking about just Social Security. We're talking about the most intimate details of people's background checks, where they get into things that you wouldn't want your mother to know. You don't want your spouse to know. You want to basically slit your wrist because you don't want your employers to know. Heaven forbid a foreign power that could blackmail you. You certainly don't want them to know. And then add to that 5.6 million sets of fingerprints. I mean, it's tough enough as an intelligence operative to change an identity. You can't change your fingerprints. So, this is what's going on. This is how badly this is happening. And when you look at the security system that was in place at OPM, it was Byzantine and it was ancient. And the same with most agencies in the federal government. I guarantee you most agencies and most governments around the world, state governments in the U.S., disaster. South Carolina got breached. The governor, when asked, how come the tax information for every human being in your state wasn't encrypted? The response was, well, encryption is hard. It's like, oh, give me a break. And so, until we get more serious about minimizing risk, monitoring, managing the damage. I talk about managing the damage in the book.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't realize that institutions with whom they have relationships offer programs to help you through identity incidents. And in some cases, it's free. You just have to ask. With businesses, they've got to learn how to manage the damage. Every business needs to be prepared. Every government agency needs to be prepared for a breach. And they have to have a plan that they execute as if you were on a nuclear submarine and you got the alert that we are at war. It has to be literally from muscle memory. And your response has to be urgent, transparent, and empathetic. And if it's not, you're going to be judged that way and you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. If it's a business, you could lose business or go out of business. If it's the government, a lot of people could get thrown out of government because of it.
Wow. Well, Adam, really appreciate you taking the time to scare the hell out of us today. But I think maybe we all need a little bit of wake-up call on this, for real.
I think that you just have to understand this is the crime of the millennium, that there will be changes to the way we protect data, changes to the way the data is aggregated, but unfortunately there is such an obsession with data aggregation around the world, the desperate need to know everything about everyone, combined with the desperate need by everyone to tell everyone everything. And you can see why we're in the quandary we're in, but be smart. Do things that can help you better protect your data. Do things that help you understand how quickly you could possibly detect there is an issue with your data, so that you can move through damage control to get it under control. Because if you aren't aware, if you aren't alert, if you aren't diligent, if you're not looking at credit reports, you're not checking accounts on a daily basis, not thinking about more sophisticated monitoring programs, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Well, I appreciate sharing that with my audience. Adam, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation, and Happy New Year.
You too.